How profitable is your dental practice? If you're like the average dentist or average professional for that matter, you may be figuring this out wrong. And that's what I want to talk to you about in this week's tip. So how's profit normally calculated in a dental practice? Let's say you're a dentist and you own a practice and it's collecting $100,000 a month. And you pay yourself as a salary $10,000 a month, right? And the expenses for the practice outside of that $10,000 salary are $70,000 a month. So you got your $10,000 you make, the $70,000 in expenses, that's $80,000. So when we look at profit, we say, well, there's $20,000 left over, but we could also include the $10,000 that we're paying you. So we'd say that the profit is $30,000 a month or 30%. That's the usual way you see it calculated, and that is most likely close to what's going to end up on your profit and loss statement. Your salary might not end up at the bottom line, it just may be that $20,000, but essentially, what is the owner doctor getting? $30,000 bucks out of $100,000, therefore the profitability is 30%. Well, couple things with this. Let's first use an example outside of the world of dentistry for a second. Sometimes I find that helpful, but because a business is a business. Let's say you owned a furniture store, and this furniture store made, $5 million a year. And you were the CEO of the furniture store, and you paid yourself $400,000 a year. And if you looked at the expenses for the furniture store, including your $400,000 CEO salary, they were $3.8 million a year. So you make $5 million, expenses are $3.8 million, including that $400,000 you're making. That leaves $1.2 million left over. So let's say as the CEO of this furniture store, you're hitting a point where you go, I'd like to go do something else, or I'd like to cut back and maybe retire, whatever it is you might want to do, but you don't want to sell the business. Well, to do that, you have the fact that you own the business, and you have the fact that you're running the business. These are two separate things. These are mutually exclusive. So you have to replace yourself as the CEO, or there's a good chance this furniture store isn't going to continue doing $5 million a year. So let's say you hire a replacement CEO for the same salary, $400,000 a year. So the expenses stayed the same, $3.8 million, and let's say the gross stays the same, $5 million. But you're no longer getting that CEO salary, so what was left over? $1.2 million, that's profit. Profit is the owner's pay. That's why when there's none, the owner gets paid nothing. And if there's some, the owner gets that as pay. That's because what does an owner contribute to a business? They contribute vision, they contribute planning, they contribute, they motivate the members of the business as well as the executives to move forward, and they started the business. Ownerships is paid with profit. Okay, that's generally how this works. So let's transpose this into a dental practice for a second. So let's go back to my earlier example. Practice is collecting $100,000 a month. Doctor is paying themselves $10,000 a month, and that $10,000 plus the $70,000 in expenses leaves $20,000 a month left as the bottom line. That's profit, right? Well, here's what's missing from that equation. If we dug into this a little bit and we had to replace the doctor owner as the doctor, because again, if you're investing in a business, if you invest in stocks or if you buy a business and you're not going to be actively involved in that business, the only money you're going to make is profit. And that's how you determine whether a business is a good or a bad idea to invest into. So if we do this, $100,000, $70,000 in expenses, we're paying the doctor $10,000, well, now we look at, well, how much of this is the doctor owner producing? Well, the doctor owner is producing $80,000 of the monthly production. So how much would it cost this doctor owner to replace themselves with a doctor who could produce $80,000? And how much would they have to pay that doctor to produce $80,000 a month? This is when you start to calculate how you're figuring out your profit. Well, in that case, let's say we're paying an associate doctor $24,000 a month to produce $80,000. We're paying them 30%. So let's look at these expenses again now. Practice is collecting $100 and producing $100. $70,000 in expenses, which is admittedly high, but just we'll use it for our example. But then we're paying an associate doctor 30% of the $80,000 dollars that the owner doctor was producing before to replace the owner doctor. That cost us $24,000. 70 plus 24 is $94,000. The amount of profit actually coming out of this practice is only $6,000 a month, or 6%, which is terrible. So when you're calculating profit, you should take a look as the owner, because it's two different jobs. You're the owner, and you're also the doctor. So we're looking from the owner hat, so to speak here. If I had to replace myself as the doctor, how much would I have to pay another doctor to do what I'm doing? Because in most cases, it's a lot more than you're paying yourself. And that skews, there's an accounting definition of profit, but it skews this. There's the accounting definition and the tax definition you're getting from your accountant. That's fine. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about from an investing perspective, what's the actual profit from the business? Now, what should that number be? Well, that number should be at least 20% on the low end, profit margin. On the high end, it would be 30. What I normally like to see is at least 23 to 25%. So how would that roll out? I'd have a practice collecting $100,000, and after paying everybody, including the associate doctor, to replace what you're producing, I'm left with at least 23%. So I'd be left with $23,000. We see this proof of concept all the time with our clients when they start a satellite practice, right? So in a satellite practice, they're not there, so they have to pay associate doctors to do all the production. So when that practice is producing 100, we want to see at least $23,000 that the owner doctor is entitled to, whether it's to retire debt or whatever they want to do with that $23,000 a month. That's what they should be left over with at the end of the month. So this is an exercise I recommend that you do in your practice. Take a look at what your expenses are, what it would cost to pay a doctor to do what it is that you are doing from a production perspective, and see what would be left at the end. If what's left at the end is less than 20%, you have problems. You are overspending somewhere, or you're underproducing, which could also be a big deal. And this is just as an aside. If anybody watching this video is older like me and has been around in the industry since the 90s, I ask you this. When you heard about overhead, what was your overhead in the 1990s as a dentist supposed to be as a percentage? If you were around in that time period, you just said 50%. That was the ideal overhead you were trying to hit as a dentist back in the 1990s. Okay, and actually in the 80s, the 70s, and so on, even before. Well, that's changed a lot. It's very rare to see a dentist come in with a 50% overhead. And in most cases, it has a little bit to do with overspending, but in a lot of cases, it has to do with underproducing. And the biggest culprit in this is if you're in network, because you're receiving compensation that really does not work for what you're doing in your business. You can't be profitable long-term on $800 crowns when your normal fee is $1,300 or $1,400. So if you find you do these calculations and at the end of it you find that your profit margin is under 20% in your practice based on the numbers I just gave you, here's what I'd recommend, and you're involved in a lot of networks, here's what I advise that you do. Here at MGE, we offer a consultation called the Roadmap to a Fee-for-Service Practice. It's something that we normally only do with clients. For a limited time, we're doing it with anyone who wants to get out of network. I'll put a link to it below the video here. If you find your number is too low, your profit isn't where it should be, click that, set yourself up an appointment, and we can point you in the right direction to get out of network. And again, if it's not a fees thing or production thing, it might mean that you're just spending too much money on other things. But anyway, a little bit of a different way of looking at this. It has nothing to do with the way it's represented when you file taxes per se, but it definitely, that's something in the realm of your accountant or tax attorney, whoever you're talking to. But from a business owner perspective, this is the viewpoint that I recommend our clients look at it from. Hope that helps. If you'd like to find out more about MGE, you can always check us out online at mgeonline.com or call us at 800-640-1140. Or if you'd like to continue seeing more tips like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the notifications button so that you get notified as soon as these tips come out. Folks, have a great week, and we'll see you at the next tip.